Hi again, everybody. Let's dig right into chapter 1. What is art? In this chapter, we're going to explore historical arguments about the definition of art, who is an artist, how do we distinguish between art and craft, what is the role of the viewer, and reasons why people make art. In the world we live in, technology is changing every day, and images play an essential role. We're inundated with sounds and videos and pictures and text messages that are instantly accessible. Advertising can make or break a product. People can visit museums from halfway around the world. TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube make ordinary people superstars. An eerie premonition in 1968, Andy Warhol, founder of the pop art movement, stated, "In the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes." Technology today creates that stardom. For all of the advancements in technology that surround us with images, the fundamental dynamics of visual arts have remained the same. Every culture throughout time has produced art. Art has allowed us to gain insight into the lives of our ancestors, and it fulfills the need for human expression. By enhancing our visual art literacy, we become more aware of how powerful the images are that surround us daily. So what is visual art? We've already said that we're inundated with images on a daily basis, and these images represent desire, power, religion, memories, needs, wants, but are they art? Even in cultures where art means utilitarian objects, those objects still have an artistic function. So, the definition of art has changed over time as cultures have tried to resolve problems with earlier definitions. The historical development of the idea of what art is began way back with the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks' definition of art was imitating the real world. That's what mimesis means. It was important that paintings looked so real that people could reach out to grab objects. The same idea applied to their sculptures. Mimesis was the idea of art copying reality. It was representing objects. Later came Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy, who was the author of War and Peace in 1869, but he was also an art theorist. And he thought that the definition of art was that it was communication. He thought that art is a communication of feeling. But what if an artwork doesn't convey the feelings of the artist to the viewer? The problem with this definition is that it's unverifiable and it's very much viewer dependent. Clive Bell came up with the idea of significant form. He favored that idea that this art is significant form, or the quality that brings us aesthetic pleasure. He believed that we only needed a sense of form and color to appreciate an artwork. But is form and color always enough? This is a circular reasoning, defining art as we notice it. And it's a good start, but it doesn't take us deep enough. Then George Dickey and Arthur Danto came up with the idea of art world, the idea of the institutional theory of art. It was first promoted by Dickey and Danto in the 1960s. Unfortunately, this theory is more political than aesthetic, as the theory is all about the power, who has the power to define art. So what then is our definition of art? In our world, we need both science and art to exist. Science allows us to understand how the world works and how to make predictions about things. Art is the other side of our experience with the world. Science moves ideas from the world into the mind through testing and observation, while art moves ideas from the mind into the world. Each person brings their own past experiences and perceptions of the world around them to their observations and judgments of art. What is art worthy of our attention, and how do we know when we found it? This makes our decisions about art very personal, and we must be careful to respect other person's ideas, even if they differ from our own. What one person likes, another person may not, and that's okay. As we work to increase our visual literacy over the coming semester, we're going to be looking at various artworks and artists throughout history in order to increase your ability to interpret works of art. So what's an art? What's a craft? While arts and crafts seem to be the same, they're ultimately distinguished by their end use. If the end use is to be a part of daily life, such as jewelry, pottery, or glass, the object's considered to be a craft. And the level of a craft is determined by how closely the end product conforms to the predicted outcome of a series of rules that govern how the craft should be created. Simplified, it means a quilt maker's end result is a blanket. Colorful fabrics and the designs make it unique. Science sounds a little bit like a science experiment. Now, fine art, however, goes beyond the craft, so the production of fine art is encouraged by a free and open-ended exploration. In other words, we may set out to do a landscape, but an artist is free to interpret the kind of landscape, the style, the technique, the medium. The outcome of fine art is supposed to be surprising and original. So who then's an artist? We tend to consider an artist someone that has talent and skills to make creative works. And there are different titles for those who make and build utilitarian objects. An artisan or craftsperson is a skilled person who produces a decorative or utilitarian object, but they're not the inventor of the original form. I want to make a quilt, which is a utilitarian item, but I get to choose the colors, the fabrics, the design. But in the end, it still turns out to be a blanket. They could also use a traditional craft form, but develop patterns or changes in the craft form to make it their own creation. The Middle Ages marked the advent of apprenticeships. Today, we still have apprenticeships for trades like electrical, plumbing, etc. An apprentice works with a master artist or craftsman for 5 to 9 years, after which they would become a member of that particular craft or art guild. They worked their way from a journeyman to a master craftsman in their own right. We really don't know how artists and artisans trained prior to the Middle Ages, but we can look at examples of the work that was produced. In your work, we have a few examples. In ancient Mesopotamia, a ruler named Gudea, who reigned from 2144 to 2124 BC, was known for building temples. These temples always had statues of Gudea in them. Statues weren't made to be exact replicas, but they were their interpretation of what a ruler should look like. Most of these artisans were anonymous. While evidence of skilled artisans exists through time, many are never identified as an individual in relationship to their work. Objects made of stone were much less common than objects made of clay in the ancient world. Pottery appears almost 6,000 years before the Gudea statue. It was not until the Greeks, however, that pottery became known by the person who created it. Amphoras in the 4th century BC began to be signed by the potter and the painter of the decorative vessel. The Panathenaea was a festival that celebrated the goddess Athena. Only the best potters and painters would be asked to make vessels for this celebration. The maker's signature on a winning piece was an advertisement for that individual artist. In China, scholar painters combined painting and poetry. Their work was considered more expressive, more spontaneous, more personal. They were part of the elite, following the traditions of Confucian teaching, where they expressed themselves with wisdom and grace, especially in poetry. The painting didn't illustrate the poem, but was created to invoke a feeling created by the poem. From the 13th century, paintings were associated with a specific artist, and a red seal became their signature. Now, during the second half of the 19th century, artists began to break away from traditional art education. They were feeling that there were too many constraints in traditional art. So these artists began to follow their own creative ideas. Here, artists could pursue what James Whistler called art for art's sake. He said that he could create art that served no other purpose than to express what he, as the artist, found to be elevating, harmonious, and pleasing to the eye, mind, and soul. So what is the role of the viewer? The artist always has an audience or a viewer in mind when they create their art. Sometimes the viewer in mind is the artist. Most of the time, however, the viewer in mind is someone else. Sometimes the artist may be trying to impact a future viewer, or they may be expressing a feeling or an emotion of their own without any other person in mind. We, as the viewer, know that we do not have the full knowledge of what the artist is trying to say to us. Not knowing this doesn't keep us from appreciating the artwork. We may like the colors, the subject matter, or the composition. We can like and appreciate the artwork as it stands. The cave paintings in France are examples of artwork where we can only guess the meanings. Why do we make art then? Well, different cultures make art for different reasons. They may be depicting the world around them or the universe. Art fulfills a need to express personal or community ideas and feelings. Since every person lives a unique life, we can tell someone about something about which they have no knowledge. We have a personal need to create art, and a lot of art comes out of that personal decision to put an idea, a feeling, or a concept into a visual format. Since it's personal, the end product will take a wide range of forms. Now, everybody has doodled. If you could look back at all my notes that I took during my years in school, you would find a lot of doodles. Jackson Pollock's work looks a lot like doodling. Jackson Pollock is the inventor of action painting. He would put a canvas on the floor or a wall and throw paint at it. And he said that art to him was the action of painting itself. Some art provides personal commentary or the artist's personal viewpoint on a subject. Marjane Satrapi created graphic novels that recall her experiences and thoughts during the 1979 Iranian Revolution. She wanted her audience to think that her tale was relatable. She's not seeking sympathy for herself, but for the Iranian people as a whole. Art can bring emotions to the surface, enabling the artist to understand those emotions. Art therapy is a version of this. Professionals use art as a catalyst to understand and treat mental disorders or psychological distress such as human trafficking, depression, or suicidal thoughts. This process is called catharsis. Whistler's idea of art for art's sake rejected outside influences such as contemporary artistic and social standards in order to purify art of external corruption. This followed the creation of art before the 19th century that was supported under the direction of religious, political, and cultural authorities. So then why do we make art? Sometimes we make art to maintain community stability. And there we create artwork that identify the commonalities between us. Architecture, monuments, murals are all visual ways to show community. Visual conventions, or the way we read art, can factor in how we interpret an artwork. We read left to right, so that's typically how we read an artwork. We start from the left-hand side, work our way to the right. Asian texts are read from right to left, so that's how they read an artwork. Naturally, this could cause a difference in how a viewer interprets an artwork. Architecture reflects the culture that created it. Our government buildings are typically built with Greek and Roman influence. Stone columns, facades, or fronts imply a stability and a strength. We associate ancient Greek and Roman ideas of virtue and integrity as strength and stability. More current architecture, however, follows Louis Sullivan's idea of form follows function, and that focuses on the efficiency and the functionality of the space rather than just the appearance. Sometimes our art it comes out in monuments, and monuments are usually commemorating people who exhibit certain virtues. On the left, you see a statue of St. Louis on horseback. This particular statue is in front of the St. Louis Art Museum in St. Louis. It's elevated. The total height of this is 40 feet tall. And it's elevated because that emphasizes the importance of the figure. Sometimes we have this horse statue symbolism, which isn't always correct. But if a statue depicting a rider on horseback with both front legs in the air, that means that that person died in battle. If the horse has one front leg in the air, the person died as a result of wounds received in battle. If the horse has all four legs on the ground, the person died of natural causes. That's a fun idea, but it doesn't always pan out as far as being historically correct. On the right, you see a monument by Auguste Rodin from 1889 called the Burghers of Calais. This is in Calais, France. And Rodin placed these statues on the ground, and it made them human, made them more of a human kind of figure. These burghers, which is a religious type of person, offered themselves as sacrifices to save their city. The Vietnam Memorial by Maya Lin is a simple monument, but the way it is placed, looking like it's sunk in the ground, reflects the belief that many people had of the war being kind of conducted below the surface. Simple names of people on there, a very striking and a very solemn type of monument. Another kind of communal art is a mural. And a mural is a painting on a wall. It's on the wall itself. Murals can be private or public. The earliest murals were created to tell historical stories. Egyptians combined writing and images to commemorate past leaders. Some of those murals were actually erased when a past leader fell out of favor. Murals have been uncovered in the excavated ruins of Pompeii, and famous murals such as The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci and The Ceiling of the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo in Rome depict crucial scenes in the teaching of the Catholic Church. Because the illiteracy rate was so high at this time, the murals were often used to educate the public about their religious history and doctrine. Now, modern muralists such as Diego Rivera from Mexico and Thomas Hart Benton from Missouri illustrate history as a way to draw people together. The painting on the mural on the right-hand side is actually in the state capitol in Jefferson City. And many of you, if you took an 8th grade trip to the state capitol, have seen that. Now, some of the concepts that we're going to be exploring in later chapters. Chapter 2 is the structure of art, form, and design. We're actually going to be breaking that down into 2 different sections, and part of the section about the different kinds of drawing media we're actually going to throw in there with chapter 3. So chapter 2 is we're going to define the forms of art, the materials and processes creating them. As we continue on, we will explore the elements of art and the principles of art and how those elements are combined to create compositions. Chapter 3 discusses the significance of the materials used in art. We'll look at monetary and cultural values also that are placed upon the media that is used in an artwork. Chapter 4 will be describing art. This is where we're going to start doing some formal analysis. We'll talk about how we can critically analyze a piece of art. The tools that we will discuss in that chapter help us learn more about the art and enhance our appreciation of art as we strive to understand it and the relationship of it to us or to other cultures and other times. Meaning in art, the socio-cultural context, symbolism, and iconography. So as we're looking at an artwork as a part of the culture in which it was made and the factors that influence it, we look at the artwork's meaning, whether it be symbolism or iconography, to help us provide a deeper understanding of the art. Chapter 6, we're going to connect art to our lives. For art to have meaning to us, we must find some connection to us, our lives. So we're going to look at its aesthetics and the roles that art play. Now, form and architecture will examine the purpose, function, and meaning in design and construction of sites and buildings within a variety of cultures. In art and identity, we're going to look at the artist's personal identity and what the artist is trying to communicate. Identity within a clan, a culture, a nation, or other groups as they share traits, and how do those notions of identity influence the artist and the art they create. Then chapter 9 talks about art and power. Art has been used as a means of communication by those in power. The power of art goes far beyond the uses of those in control. Art can be used to build influence, increase leverage, give hope, and a variety of other feelings. Chapter 10, we're going to talk about art and ritual life. So the symbolism of space and ritual objects. So how does our art help us to understand ourselves as mortal creatures and the role of the art in our spiritual lives? Chapter 11, art and ethics. This is probably going to take us a couple of weeks as well. Art can introduce us to new ideas and it can influence what we think about ourselves and others. Art can inform, art can change us. This chapter introduces the issues facing artists and others in how they present themselves and their art. Here are some of the key terms that were in chapter 1. I would suggest that you make sure that you understand those things. They may be part of your chapter quiz. It could be part of the final at the end.